That's my celebration dance. You know, that dance is for all the people in the Philippines that are happy about, Wesley So winning his games. And as you guys know, he has won the first match of the 4 games between Quang Liêm. So welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Pretty excited. The video I posted is definitely not like, the best that I've ever had. But, it's been kind of low recently. So I'm glad to have, the views that I have on it right now. So I appreciate everybody for watching. All my people in the Philippines. Maraming salamat po sa nanonood. But yes, mabuhay to you guys. Ingat lagi. Almasal tayo. Magandang pon. For all my people in the Philippines. Masaya kong makiti kang muli. Appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. And for anybody who is coming from Vietnam, I will say Jao Mui Nui and Cam On Ban for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. But this is the first game that they played today. So, the round that they were in today was round 7. So this is just the first game from that. So if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look and see what we have for this game. Also, Maligayang Pagdating sa my chess, ladies and gentlemen. I'm trying to, come on with English and then say, that in Tagalog as well. Just, getting it working. But if you guys are ready, let's go. So we have E4, E5, knight comes to F3, knight to C6, bishop to B5. We have A6, bishop comes back to A4. So we do have the Ruy Lopez, and this is the Morphy defense. A6 just knocking that bishop, asking the bishop what does it want to do. So we do have knight to F6. We have castles by white. And of course, as you guys know, you're not winning a pawn after knight takes E4. So we do have bishop to E7. And then we have D3. And D3, you have rook to E1. You also have D3 that can just, make sure that you, protect this pawn on E4. We have B5. Bishop comes to B3. We see D6, protecting, because, of course, you couldn't just like move the knight yet because you were going to be sacrificing this pawn. So we do see A4. This is just another way to get luft for the bishop. You can either push the C pawn or push the A pawn just to make sure that your bishop, kind of has the ability to back up a little bit. So we see bishop to D7. We have C3, just giving the bishop a little bit more options. We see castles by black. Bishop comes to C2. We see rook to E8. Rook over to E1. We have H6. And this is just multi-purpose move. I mean, not only are you giving yourself lift for your king, but you are, kind of preventing like the bishop G5s or knight to G5s. Knight to G5 really isn't that much of a threat in this particular game because you guys remember last game, that bishop was on this diagonal, so it was kind of tickling this F7 pawn. But we do have knight B to D2. Bishop comes back to F8. We see knight to F1. We see B4 trying to break the structure on the queen side down a little bit. We see knight to G3. Pawn takes C3, pawn takes C3. So, we kind of have a little target that black's going to try to see if they can do something about. We do have D5, trying to further break down white structure. We see pawn takes D5, knight takes D5, and then we see bishop to D2. Of course, this knight was taking advantage of the fact that that pawn was, undefended at the moment. So we do see rook to B8. Very logical move. This rook is just trying to take over the only open file on the position. So, very principled, fundamental move. So we have A5. And this is just giving the bishop the ability to come onto this diagonal. And we do see knight back to F6. And this is the novelty of the game. So, first time we've seen it. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we saw queen to F6 before. So this was, there's at least a game or two in the database where queen to F6 was played. But we do see knight back to F6. And then we see bishop to A4. And bishop to A4 is just, the intent is very clear. You want to, remove this knight so that you can just grab this pawn, basically. And so black responds to that with bishop to D6, making sure that that's not a possibility. We see H3, white doing their own little luft and just restricting move with this bishop and this knight. So we see knight back to A7. Bishop comes down to C2. And you guys can see, this bishop and this bishop, they're on some nice diagonals. It's never bad when you have your bishops pointing towards your opponent's king. Sometimes you might have some tactics or some chances to throw an attack down. We see knight down to B5. Just another way for the knight to try to attack this pawn. We see queen over to C1. We see bishop to C6. And we do see knight to H4. And it might kind of seem like in this position, the queen has moved over to C1. to try to put this little battery on this pawn here. And you know, like if you were to have a sacrifice in that particular position, it wouldn't be losing. But it just wouldn't quite be 100% sound. So if we actually go into what that would look like, the bishop would take on h6. We see pawn taking h6, queen taking h6, and this really just kind of gives black the ability to counterattack your position. So the bishop would take on f3, pawn would take on f3, and then we'd actually be losing a pawn on c3. So as you guys can see, you know, you have a nice little kind of attack going. You know, maybe if you can push this pawn up, you might have a little bit of chances and stuff like that. But you know, you've actually just kind of given up just a little bit too much, and plus your king is a little bit open too. So I mean, it's not the best position to be in, but I mean, you know, sometimes these sacrifices can, you know, they're tile-esque. So you know, sometimes they can be kind of hard to play against. So the knight comes to h4. We do see bishop back to f8. We see knight h to f5. We have queen down to d5. We see knight down to e3. You know, of course, you know, black was threatening checkmate because, you know, threatened checkmate because why not? But knight to e3 not only attacks the queen, but does protect this vulnerable g2 square. We see queen over to c5. We see rook to a4. You know, thinking about there might be some possibilities of swinging the rook to c4 at some point. The knight comes to d6. Now we do have an attack on that rook on a4. So we throw in an attack on the queen with d4. Queen comes back to a7. And then now we see rook down to a1 because, like I said, the rook was attacked. And then we see queen to a8. You know, there are actually a couple of different things that you want to have to think about in this position. Like the bishop and the queen are, you know, attacking this square. But more importantly, they're attacking this e4 square. So as you can see, both knights, this bishop and this queen and this pawn, I mean, everything. I mean, once you were to, you know, be able to trade here, this rook is also coming down that file too. So you kind of need to do a little bit of damage control. So we see f3. And f3 is just really, really discouraging this move from being played. It's not impossible, but, you know, it's just not going to be favoring black. Pawn takes d4, pawn takes d4, and then we have knight over to b5. You know, tossing a little attack on this pawn over here. So you see black is starting to try to pick at white's structure a little bit. We see knight e to f5, and then we see bishop back to d7. And something I want to say about the position. Now, for those of you that watched my previous video, you know, you guys remember that knight to h6 situation. As you guys can see, the position is slightly different. You know, you have this particular pawn structure. You know, before you had a rook lift that came. You know, the queen was over here. It had the ability to come up. So you don't quite have the same type of sacrifices. That's not a move that was played. That was an accident. You don't quite have the same, you know, opportunities in this particular position that you had before. So moving on, that's just kind of let you know, like, every position, even if it looks similar, there might be little nuances in the position that might, you know, that might make things a little bit different. So there we go. So we do see we don't see that. So we do see rook comes to e5. Yes, something I wanted to show you guys. After bishop to d7, let's no, I go back. Okay, no, moving on. Rook came to e5. We see queen to a7. We see bishop to e3. You know, we're hoping at some point, you know, on a good day, we can kind of discover an attack on this queen with pushing the pawn. And then we do see c5. And c5 is actually a pretty weakening move. So I'm kind of curious if you can see, like, how it weakens black. So if you want to go ahead and pause the video and see what white can actually play in this position, go ahead and do so. Okay, the thing that's gonna really, like, shock the crap out, I think, most of y'all, is that the guess the move in this game is literally identical to the last game. And I will be able to go back and show you why. When I was telling you before about there are no knight takes h6s, the position is different, there were some key reasons why it was different in that position and why it actually is allowed now. So the move is knight takes h6. So if you guess knight takes h6, despite everything that I just got done saying, you're a gangster, because not only did you not listen to what I said, but I calculated, or you did something else and you were like, hey man, it's got to be something like this, right? So, and I will definitely be going back in a second and showing you exactly why this sacrifice works now, and it literally didn't work a couple of moves ago. After knight takes h6, we see pawn takes h6, bishop takes h6, we see rook takes e5, pawn takes e5, and now we have a nice little attack on this knight here, so we're forcing it to move. The pawn comes to c4, and this discovers an attack on the king with check. We see king to h2. Now, you know, you guys can see this position. Like, this bishop is under attack from this one. You know, this knight is under attack, so it's really going to need to move. You know, the position is like really, it's a really special situation. So before we go any further, what I want to do is I want to back up and I want to show you exactly why the sacrifice didn't work before and somehow it works now, because I think that's crucial. So like I said, after bishop to d7, if we were to take knight takes h6 in this particular position, we would have pawn takes h6, and then the problem with the move that we saw in the position that we just came from, bishop takes h6, is rook takes e1. And now the problem is you are checking the king and you are forcing this queen away. And then after the queen takes on e1, you're literally hanging your bishop on h6. So now you're down 2 entire pieces. So that one thing is the problem. But what you would do to alleviate that situation is you would actually take on e8 first. The rook would take on e8. You'd see bishop takes h6, but the main thing about the position is the fact that you can go queen to d5, and this literally is the key move that covers everything. Because now the problem is you don't have checks here. You know, you can't just like be moving the knights and stuff like that. I mean, that's the key in the position. So if we go to what we saw in the game, the bishop took h6, we saw rook takes e5, pawn takes e5, c4 with check, king comes to h2. Now the problem is this queen is on a completely different square. So if you guys remember, the queen was on a8 and it was allowed to make this d5 move. But now the queen is on a7 and there is no way for this queen to come like really anywhere that's going to make any difference as far as the king being checked here. So now this is a very possible square for the bishop to go to. So if we just like watch what Wesley so does because of those nuances, then we will see exactly like why it's way different. The knight came back to h7. We saw bishop took f8. We saw knight takes f8, and then we saw queen to g5. And like I said, you remember before how this queen was on d5, this pawn wasn't here, so the queen was protecting g5. Now it's not. So this is literally mating. So even just a few moves before this sacrifice occurred, it wasn't live. And I mean, that's literally why you didn't see Wesley so do it, because he's calculating like, nah, that queen could come back. I know for a fact he calculated queen to d5. So queen came to g5, and this is just completely busted lost. We see knight back to g6. You know, if we were to see king to h8, you literally are getting into a situation where mate is completely unstoppable. Queen would come to h6 with check. King would go back over to g8, and then you see knight to h5. And as you guys can see, there is literally nothing that you can do about this mate. You know, you definitely don't want to move knight here because you're going to be looking at something like this, and that is going to be a nice little tactic. It's something that you see all the time on a tactics trainer. You know, like I said, we see queen to g5, and then we see knight to g6, and this is just prolonging it, but you're still mating. The knight comes to h5, and as you guys can see, these dark squares around this king are just like insanely weak. This queen can't come and defend, and this is a light square bishop. So you guys know that it does not influence dark squares whatsoever. So we do see queen coming back to d4, trying to like maybe attack this rook, but trying to see if we can maybe get away to get back in here. I mean, the knight, you know, I mean, it's, you know, it's one of those situations where, you know, the queen was thinking maybe I can take here and then the queen will take, you know, something like that. But, you know, because you are going to be checking the king if you can get this in. But, you know, white is not allowing this to occur because we see bishop takes g6, queen takes a8, and let me see here, I'm trying to look. Yes. Okay. So we see queen takes a1, and then we see bishop takes f7. And if we actually go back, after bishop took g6, if you just were like, hey, whatever, I'm going to throw the game away, and you actually take back with the pawn, you would be seeing this variation, which is queen takes g6. The king is, I mean, really doesn't have anywhere to go anyway. I mean, you know, king to h8 is mate. And then you see queen to f6 with check, and then you literally are looking at mate in one. It doesn't matter if the king comes over here or comes over here. You're either placing checkmate with the queen or placing checkmate with the knight. It's game over. So, bishop takes g6, queen takes a1, because literally Le Quang is like, you know, just whatever, dude. Like, I mean, this is, I mean, I could just see him sitting there like, man, this sucks, dog. Like, and then we see bishop takes f7 with check. And, you know, I'm going to try to make sure I say this correctly. Lopez. Yeah, I think Lupe is sick, cruel. Like it's bad. It's a slang term that I learned thanks to my guy. I appreciate it very much. Salamat aking kaibigan. It's Lupe. It's Lupe, man. So we see king takes f7, queen to f6 with check, and then we literally have the same position that we had before. As far as the king is going to have to back up to one of these squares, and it's either going to be a queen mate or it's going to be a knight mate, just to show you guys what that looks like. Of course, if the king comes back here, that's mate. And if the king comes over here, that's just going to be knight to g7 with mate. And if you guys notice something that is crazy insane about the position, white has two pieces left. They literally have a queen and a knight. And because you can mate with the queen and the knight, that's literally all white needs to win the game. So literally every single piece that black has, they literally just don't matter. So you got a queen, a rook, a knight, and a bishop, and it doesn't matter because white has everything they need to checkmate you. So it's just a really crazy game. Let me see the other phrase I had, lang malakas at enggaling. Just strong and great. So I'm just, trying to make sure I say that correctly. There's many different ways to say it as I've gotten from my comments from my people. I'm just trying to say great and strong. It's just, Wesley So is really playing a really nice tournament as he's done in the past. But I will skip the good mornings because I want to keep this under 17 minutes. I don't like going this long. But I appreciate everybody very much for coming by and taking a look at my stuff. So for my people in the Philippines, Makita Tayo Mamaya and Paalam, and I will see you guys next time.